Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gilner, and thank you so much for joining us today. This episode is brought to you by Athletes Brand. Athletes Brand works with pro athletes to design some awesome t-shirts and then donate the proceeds to a charity. But what really caught my attention was the amount of effort they put into the charity component of their products. Athletes Brand educates about the cause, says what the money I'm spending is going toward within the cause, and then follow up with how the cause actually spent the money afterwards. September's new release by Athletes Brand is a collaboration with baseball player Brandon Barnes to help fight human trafficking. Every purchase of the shirt that says, quote, "Save our children, they are not for sale," benefits Operation Underground Railroad, which exists to help find and rescue children that were abducted and put into sex trafficking. Visit athletesbrand.com in September, and your proceeds will help fund these efforts. For more, follow Athletes Brand on Instagram @athletesbrand. On today's show, we have on David Jeans, head baseball coach for De La Salle High School in California. David is an industrial engineer by trade, and after pursuing that for several years, started coaching a 6th grade basketball team. This led him to coaching football at De La Salle during the Bob Ladouceur era, which is one of the most successful dynasties in high school football history. He worked his way up the ranks and became the head baseball coach at De La Salle in 2012, and since then, they have reached the title game every year and won it in 2012, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 19. So on the show, we discuss how being a football coach under Coach Ladd helped him to establish a, quote, development first program. We discuss how being an engineer has helped him with practice plan design in limited space, and we dive deep into what being a Spartan looks like on a daily basis. You're going to love this episode with David Jeans. David, welcome to the show.
Jonathan, thanks for having me on. Anytime we can talk high school sports, for me is awesome. So thanks for reaching out.
Absolutely. And, before we hit the record button, I started to geek out a little bit because you were a De La Salle football coach. And a couple of years ago, I went on through the journey of When the Game Stands Tall. So I watched the movie and then read through all the books. And you got to be a really, really cool part of that while that was going on. And now you're the head coach at De La Salle for baseball, which is so cool. And so again, welcome to the show, and I'm really excited to get to learn from you and to get to grow together with you today. But can you give us a short snapshot of, how you got there and then why you decided to get into coaching?
Yeah. I'm a graduate of Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. I'm an industrial engineer. I played a little fall baseball at Cal Poly. And the time just didn't work out with my engineering classes. So I gave it up. And one of my best friends started coaching a 6th grade basketball team. And he was like, "Hey, we're not very good, but I need some help. I want to try this." And I helped him. And it worked out well. I loved it. And so after that, some of those same kids' fathers also did baseball. And they said, "Hey, you guys did such a great job coaching basketball. Would you be willing to coach some Babe Ruth baseball?" And my buddy was more of a basketball guy, and I was more of a baseball guy. But we kind of double switched. So he goes, "Hey, I'll help you if you go do baseball." And so I switched over there and started coaching baseball at Babe Ruth in San Luis Obispo in the early '90s, and I loved it. We had major success. We almost won it all. I ended up becoming president of Babe Ruth baseball while I was in college, and just had a blast with it. But how I got to De La Salle, after I graduated, reality hits. You go do your job stuff, and I was in industry for 6 or 7 years. And my head JV football coach from high school took a new job, Clayton Valley, which is near De La Salle. And he was like, "I really need some help." And so I decided to get back into it. I became the offensive coordinator there for football. And then we brought on a guy, Bob Ralston, who was an All-American at Arizona. and he ended up being the head coach at Clayton Valley. So he coached football with me. His uncle was a big time coach at Stanford, John Ralston. And so he helped me out with my wide receivers. I helped him out with his freshman baseball, and I learned a lot from him. And a couple years later, I decided to give up my engineering to become a teacher. And I had a good friend, Joe Aliotti, at De La Salle. He's one of the coaches on the football team, and he's the dean of students. Said, "Hey, we got a physics job open, and you could be freshman football coach and JV baseball coach." And that was in 2001. So I came over then.
Oh, I love that. And again, I love to get to interview people with different backgrounds. And so it's so interesting that you're an engineer by trade, and then you decided to, I feel like you may have been just called back to coaching, which is really, really neat. And so right now you're a physics instructor. And so I'm really curious, how does being a physics instructor help you as a baseball coach?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's just, the physics is just problem solving. It's observations and problem solving. And, that translates well to what we do. Again, I'm an industrial engineer, which is kind of an efficiency expert. So I'll get into that with my baseball field and running practices and things like that. It just helps from observing stuff, seeing everything that's going on the field. I did sales engineering, so that helped me with some of my relationship stuff with observing kids and their emotions and their needs and things like that. So it all kind of fit well together from a planning standpoint, and then from a personal standpoint. And then De La Salle was just kind of the missing piece for me from a coaching standpoint. The stuff that I learned as a football coach here is just unbelievable. When I look back at Bob Ladouceur and Terry Edson, and like I said, Justin Allenbaugh, who's now the head coach here, it was kind of the missing piece for me in terms of team atmosphere and growth as a student. So I took a lot from those guys as I started progressing. So yeah, it was a long journey to become the head baseball coach here. After I started doing football, I was the freshman football coach for 9 years. I did baseball here for a little bit. We had a change, and I applied for the job, and I didn't get it. So I coached a little bit more here for freshmen. Then there was another change. Orange Lutheran head coach Eric Borba had the job here. And I applied for the job a second time, didn't get it. So I went to the JC ranks. I coached a year. The job opened up again, and I applied for it again and did not get it. So I actually applied for the job 3 times and didn't get the job. While I was teaching at De La Salle, I went back over to Clayton Valley with Bob Ralston. He was done coaching at a community college that I helped at, and we had some success over there. And then the job opened up again here at De La Salle, and I applied for the 4th time and got it in 2012.
Oh, I love that. And they've got you since 2012, and you guys have had a ton of success since then. So I just, to be honest, I love getting to hear your background just because it is so interesting. And obviously it has made you to who you are now, which is really, a really unique background, which is really, really cool. But let's talk about what that vision started. And you did have a little bit of background at De La Salle because you were a sub-varsity coach, and maybe helped with varsity. I think you said you were a sub-varsity coach there. And so you were familiar with the program, you were familiar with the traditions there. So I'm sure that helped you whenever you came back. But let's say like you interviewed, you got the job. What were your first steps? Like when you got back on campus and you're like, okay, this is what we're going to, this is how we're going to start. This is the vision that I have. And these are the things that I want to implement as soon as I get to campus. And can you kind of walk us through what that process was like?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest part was that missing piece of what De La Salle gave me from the football side. We get kids from all over the place, and people think we get ready-made baseball players and football players, and it's really not the case. And now, don't get me wrong, we get some good people as freshmen. Devin Asiasi's now the tight end for the New England Patriots, and Austin Hooper and Justin Hooper. Those guys were good coming in as freshmen, but it's 90% of the other guys. And what I learned from football was the development side. And so I was able to take my experiences from being freshman football coach and seeing those football players develop in Bob Ladouceur's program. And when I got the job for baseball, I said I was going to mimic that. I was going to try to take a lot of that development philosophy from Bob and work it into a baseball program. And so it was kind of a big picture deal. Most people, when they take a job, they worry about their varsity players. And we made it into a whole program. So I'm with my freshman guys all the time. We usually have about 70 kids try out for freshman baseball. We have 2 teams that we have. And that development side, that workout, that full year round dedication that the football team does to achieve their success. So that I was bringing that baseball kind of community side, baseball knowledge to the Bob Ladouceur, De La Salle development of players. And then you throw on what we do here as teachers at De La Salle in the development of kids. And it was kind of like the perfect storm.
Well, perfect. I love that. So whenever you say so you guys have 2 teams and you're with the freshmen a lot, do you guys practice together most days? I mean, how does that work? Can you kind of walk us through the ins and outs a little bit?
Yeah, most people that when they hear about De La Salle, they think about the football program, which is awesome. Most people, when they come to our school, they don't laugh at us, but they're kind of like, wow, this is where you guys play football. Our home stands are inside the track. So they're not outside of the track like most normal high school.
Wow.
Okay. We're limited on space. And so the baseball field is kind of pushed right up against the football field and the track. And we only have 1 field. So most schools, are lucky enough to have 2 baseball fields. And we only have 1, and we have 4 teams practice on it. So before daylight savings time, it gets to be hard. So you have a lot of moving pieces. And so we kind of overlap our practices. So the varsity will start. They'll run through their throwing program. They'll do their individual defense. But then when they start to hit, the JVs will come on and they'll play live defense. And so they get that speed of the game. And then what happens is when we're done hitting, then the JVs will hit and the freshmen will come on and play live defense. So it's kind of that, we normally have 100 guys on our baseball field, sometimes at once. We use the parking lot. We use back behind the fence, anything we can. So the dynamics of practice is tougher. We have some batting cages and we rotate around, but we have guys moving all the time.
That's really neat. And with the amount of kids that you've got, so you've got 100 kids, is it almost like station work a little bit? So I'm a former football coach too, and I'm just thinking of all the different pieces that are going on and basically switching back into the different segments, every 5 or 10 minutes or blocks. And then you've got different coaches coaching the same stations, and all that is moving is the players, or the coaches can move with them too. But everything is very segmented and everything is like fast paced moving around. That's kind of what I'm picturing. Am I picturing the right thing?
Yeah, it's super fast. So I can't stand right now. We're starting fall ball. We're actually on the field right now, which is nice with the COVID stuff happening. And I just can't stand kids walking around. And so there's a toughness that's built around. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prepare them for a varsity practice and the pace of it. And obviously I have incoming freshmen that have no idea. And we could talk about that a little bit. But Yeah, you're absolutely right. I have a catching coordinator that works with both JV and frosh catchers. We have pitching coaches that'll work with both. Like I said, we do it more as a program now, so kids can hear a similar voice, and they know what the expectations are. So we're not recreating something by the time they get to varsity. By the time they get to varsity, they should know what we expect. They just got to get a feel for the speed.
I really like that a lot. So you're preparing them to be a varsity baseball player from the minute that they step on, and that way they're not wowed with what's going on. They're having to just adjust to the speed. So everything else is exactly the same. So have you felt like you've been able to have players that are younger step in earlier because of that?
Yeah, I have kind of a process for that. For one thing, I want to take a step back. When we take kids and we want to prepare them, we tell them we're not preparing you to be a high school player. We're preparing you to be a college player. So the expectation is not, when you step on our campus, if you're going to play freshman baseball, your expectation should be that you're going to be a college player. Just like if you were going to go to college, your expectation should be that you're going to be a pro. And so we try to hammer that all the time. This is what they're going to expect. I'm lucky. I have, with the De La Salle name, I have a lot of relationships out there with the college guys, and I kind of know what they expect, and from a toughness standpoint, and a movement standpoint, from a lifting standpoint. And so, like we tell the kids, man, you're getting ready for a practice with John Savage at UCLA, or Checkits at Santa Barbara, or a number of other places out there. So it's fun. It's fun. Getting the parents to buy into that and getting the kids to buy into that. That's another piece of it. That's harder. And that normally takes 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. So normally we don't have younger guys that could step right in. Okay. From a talent standpoint, they can. But from a mental standpoint, usually we have to develop guys. I've had 2 guys come in as freshmen. Blake Burke, he's been a 4-year starter. He's going to be a senior for me. And then Justin Hooper, he actually started on JVs, but he was throwing like 86, 87 miles an hour as a freshman, and he would hurt somebody. But even Justin Hooper did not play much as a freshman, just because from a mental standpoint, being able to handle what we do here takes 2 or 3 years. It really does. So,
no, that's really, really good. And again, I need to come watch you guys practice, because it sounds like a lot of fun to be able to see all the different moving parts. So with that, you've got a ton of different moving parts. How do you make sure everybody knows where they're going? Because I'm thinking, you've got 100 different players. Do you rely on the coaches to make sure that they have that beforehand? Do you have to teach the coaches or coach the coaches on all of these different things that are going on? And I mean, just what's your process as the head of the program to try, and especially because we're in the fall now, so there may be some listeners who want to do something similar as far from a development standpoint. How would they implement something similar to what you're doing?
Well, everything we do is skill set based. Okay. And I talk about that with my players. Everything is a tool. Okay, so as you develop players, you're just trying to increase their tool set to become better baseball players when they get into a game. And so we just use our coaches to build those tools. Like yesterday, all we did was push bunt, it was like 45 minutes, just technique and individual skill sets for the fall. And then when we get into the spring, hopefully, we can jump around from one skill set to the next, or whatever we think we need with that team. Every team is different. So the philosophy of the program and the process is the same, but the skill sets that we teach may change year to year, depending on the players and what we do to try to win. We tell the kids, if every decision you make in your life helps us to win, you're making a correct decision. And that's working on weaknesses, or turning in homework, or being a good kid in the lunchroom. picking up garbage or something like that. If every decision you make helps us to win, that means not throwing your bat or not getting mad at the umpire because we want the next pitch. And that's that maturity level. So yeah, practices, by the time spring comes around, we should be okay. Now, we don't get to be with our players technically in the fall. We don't get baseball practice like a lot of places do.
Okay.
We have to learn that in the weight room. We're huge in the weight room. So one of the big things that I took from Bob Ladouceur in the football program was we were going to develop kids in the weight room. So people tend to think of us as a big physical team. And so I was one of the first ones that even the football program didn't do weights with freshmen in the beginning. They do it now. But I jumped them on it. We learned tech. Mark Wine is outstanding as a strength and conditioning guy here. And so our freshmen will work technique on lifts for 6 months. And then by the time they become sophomores, they have the technique down so they can start working stuff a little bit. And then by the time they're juniors, they start building intent with lifting. And then by the time they're seniors, they're big and physical and strong. And we kind of do the same thing with our baseball process. We take them as freshmen and we go slow with them and teach them like how to go from point A to point B, how to go to mass fungos, how to pick up a baseball or, shag baseballs. We don't shag baseballs, but pick up baseballs and how quickly we do it. So it's all skill set based. And by the time you're a sophomore, junior, you're kind of understanding the speed. Most of that comes from the weight room, picking up the weight room, helping each other out, encouraging each other, closing the door, turning off the lights. For me, all those things are big and it translates to our practices.
So when people and coaches are discussing culture, and I think that, obviously that it seems to be a popular buzzword right now. And I know that you've heard that a lot. We want to build a culture. We want to do all of these different things. And it's all of those things that you've mentioned, I think are a big part of that. And to me, I think culture is behavior, belief, and experiences of those who are in the program, right? And those three things make up culture. And so tell us a little bit about just your vision for that. So your vision for the behavior, belief, and experiences that you want De La Salle players to have. And like you just mentioned, and I'm really piggybacking on what you just said, which is we want them to do things a certain way. So how do you teach that?
Well, I don't think it's just the baseball. I think it's the school. People usually say about De La Salle kids, hey, when I talk to a kid, I kind of know that he went to De La Salle. And that's the culture we want to build. And so we want kids to graduate, and not necessarily baseball. I teach, 125 physics students, and some of them are my baseball guys, but a lot of them aren't. We want kids to be able to look you in the eye, to be able to speak to you, to have some empathy, to think of others first, to think of the team first. We want them to be. We want men to grow up to be, good fathers and go to a job that people depend on them. That's the culture of the school, and Bob Ladouceur helped build that, but the whole school buys into it. And so our teachers have no problem coming to me about my baseball players and going, hey, this guy was late. This guy's talking out of turn. And so the baseball field is just an extension of the classroom and what we're trying to produce in men. And both my boys went here, and I would not trade that investment for anything in the world. I always tell people, hey, you can either invest in high school at De La Salle or invest in college. And they're more impressionable as high school students, and you can change them more and mold them more. I think when you go off to college, you're starting to be the person you are. So it's the culture of the school. And then just from a baseball standpoint, I think I bring that football, that toughness, that grit, the confidence. I don't want to call it swagger, but it's kind of like, hey, we're going to compete and we're going to get after it. So you kind of mix those two together for our culture. That team camaraderie, that that nice guy. We're not a bunch of talkers. We've gotten beat by a lot of good teams. We've got no hit. You tip your hat and you move on and you get better from it. But we expect to win. We expect to play hard, and we want to do it the right way. Some of the things I see on Twitter now and just would not fit us. In fact, I got on one of my players because he did a little thing. I don't think he meant to do it, but I called him on it. He was in another state playing baseball, and I'm like, hey, dude, that's not a good look. It's just not who we are. You're trying to get recruited and you're coming from De La Salle. You got to represent, even if you're playing for somebody else.
Well, what was his response?
No, he was fine with it. He's a kid still. He's a junior, or he's just becoming a junior, and he's with a bunch of other guys. And it's easy to get sucked up into that. And I don't really blame him because, again, he's a young man. He's learning. He's super respectful, and he was just like, yes, coach, I understand. So it's always learning experiences, which is why we do sports. We're trying to build men. We're not, my ultimate goal is not to have a pro guy in playing in the pros. It's having good husbands and good brothers and things like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So again, I mentioned earlier, and you've mentioned a bunch of different times that you learned under Coach Ladd. And I remember this, for some reason, this just came up off the top of my head, is because I tried this as a freshman coach, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But and I stole this from Coach Ladd in the book. He used to use these note cards that would have, I can't remember what was on them, but it's like their extra work, I think is what we called it. And they would have their like weekly goals, and then they would give them to someone else. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? Maybe I'm completely off base, but I vividly remember reading about that in the book. And I don't know if he still did that whenever you were coaching with him.
No, we still do that. Those are called commitment cards.
Yeah, that's what it was. Tell us a little bit about that.
We bring a little bit of that in our baseball program too. And he's amazing at bringing groups of kids together and demanding excellence and writing it down. It's really hard to state a goal out loud and then to the world and say, hey, this is what I want to accomplish, because you may not do that. You may not accomplish it. You may, but you may not. So there's a risk in that. And so he brought that to his team. Their commitment cards, they do them weekly. And they have to commit to a teammate. They have to stand up and commit to a teammate. There's playing goals, there's practice goals, there's lifting goals. So it's not just necessarily, hey, I'm going to get 3 interceptions, in the game. It's just not feasible. But it could be, hey, I'm not going to miss a tackle. I'm not going to let go of a guy. In practice, I'm going to run hard on my gassers and make my time every single time. And then you stand up and you commit it to a teammate. And the hard part is being held accountable by that teammate now. So that's the hard part about being a kid. So that teammate's going to hold you accountable. He's going to help you to reach your goals. And then the following week, you have to stand up and say whether you did it or not. So for high school kids, that's a difficult thing to do at first. Mm-hmm. You can get over that hump, man, you become, like I said, a good worker and a good husband and a good brother.
No, that's really cool. And I remember, doing that in several different years ago. I don't know why I stopped. I think it's really hard to keep up, like unless you're completely 100% fully invested in that. It does take a lot of time to do all of those goals and share them out. And so for listeners who hear that and are like, oh, well, I'm not going to do it now. How have you been, like, when do you find time to be able to do that?
Like I said, we don't do it as much. We do it more at our team meetings and stuff like that. Okay. So we'll do it like once every 2 weeks, or things like that. We'll open up and talk. They got it dialed, man. They're amazing coaches, and they make time for it. And part of what makes De La Salle special, and it goes back to our educational process, and I hate to use the word, but we're grinders. The football program is all about blocking and tackling in one step at a time. For your first step, your second step for the lineman, For us, it's grounders. It's coming downhill. It's 2-strike approach. It's reading ball and dirt. It's going first to third. It's throwing a 3-2 breaking ball and being able to do that over and over and over and over again. So for me in the classroom, it's my physics problems. Don't just get ready for the test. You got to be able to do problems over and over and over again. And so that's just a common theme throughout the school.
Well, and for me, I think that it sounds like they're on the pursuit of mastery. They're not just trying to check a box, which I think that, if I may get off on a little tangent, because I have been like this and still continue to fight it, it's like, okay, we read this book and we check the box and we post it on Twitter that we read the book, but what do we actually get from it? Or we take the course and we get certified, but how are we actually using it? And I think that's where great baseball players and great coaches, great learners separate themselves, is because they take the relevant information and apply it to their everyday life on their pursuit of mastery in whatever subject that you're talking about. So whether it's physics, whether it's baseball, whether it's, blocking and tackling or whatever it is, they're continuing to do the little things that add up to what, the process that what you deem is important to the end goal, which is mastery of whatever you're trying to. So I love that. And that's been one of my pursuits lately, of trying to really narrow down my focus of information flow and instead get really as good as I can with that. And I think that that's what we truly want for our players too. And so I love that you hit on that, because I think that that's truly, truly important.
I think a big part.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another added part is the adaptability. And so Bob Ladouceur did a great job for a lot of years, but towards the last 10 years, he had to change his program a lot in terms of, what plays he ran and defenses. As the competition kicked up, those guys are really, really smart too. They're not just football guys that are going out there and doing the same thing over and over again. They're continuously looking for different ways. I mean, when I first started here at De La Salle in 2012, I was more of a small ball guy, and we do that well. But I've adapted some of the philosophy and how much time I put into certain things because of the teams that we have to beat. We always say that we need to be able to beat a guy that throws 92 miles an hour with a slider. So we need that skill set. And unfortunately, the one game we lost last year before we got shut down, we lost to a guy like that. And
yeah, that's tough.
We didn't have time to prepare, and we tip our hat to him. But yeah, I mean, he did a great job. He was 91, 92 miles an hour. And after the third inning, he completely pitched us backwards. And so he was throwing 3-1 sliders to our 8-hitter. And we just didn't have enough time to prepare for that. And so that's the kind of fun part, and being able to adapt your game and how you practice or what you do from a strength and conditioning standpoint. I'm completely different than when I started for strength and conditioning to get our players ready and bigger and stronger. And so the football coaches have done a great job of that. And I've learned that, you had just stupid saying, but adapt or die.
Oh, it's so good. So let's dig in on that a little bit, David, because I think that there's so much wisdom in that, because, whenever you decide to adapt, it's got to be, it's got to be a well-informed decision, like you're talking about. You have these ideas that you want, and then you're realizing, okay, we need to shift. And there's a big difference between doing that and just trying to chase every rabbit and not being good at anything. And so let's rewind the clock a little bit and go back to 2012. Whenever you first got hired, you said that, you wanted to focus on small ball fundamentals, which I'm sure you guys still do, because you talked about, being able to field a ground ball and do these different things. But tell us some different ways and some different things that you have done differently since then that have made the most impact for your program.
I think it's stuff outside of practice and things like that. It's I carry a huge team. So normally I have 34 to 36 guys on my team.
Okay, wow, yeah.
That's huge. And so just creating competition. I run this program more like a college program where there's always another guy coming in to take your job. And so that first year, I was more like, okay, I got my varsity team. I have my guys. They were really good. We won it that year. But I changed to create a culture of competition in that, it's not just about your grade level, because a lot of kids come in as freshmen, they go, oh, I'm pretty good compared to that kid that's in the freshman class. I'm not thinking about sophomores right now, or I'm not thinking about that eighth grader that's coming in. And so just that thought process of competition. So outside, in the weight room, always competing, in the classroom, always competing. I was just kind of behind the curve. So it was funny. It took me a couple of years to get it going. And so we won it our first year. We lost in the championship our second year. We won it our third year. We lost in the championship. And we've been lucky. We've won 4 straight after that. But maybe part of that is, the freshmen buying into the whole system and the whole bit of competition. So
what are some, besides and I think that let me highlight a point for the guest is they're not, when you're segmented and you're the best player on the field on a freshman field by yourself, when you're not seeing the varsity guys every single day, that's kind of what you're talking about is you start to get the, big fish in a small pond syndrome. And then the next year, you're just completely blown away if you do get to practice with the varsity and you're like, oh gosh, and it's the same thing with every level that you go up. And so I besides seeing that internal competition with not only themselves, but with the other players around them, are there any, competitions that you do in practice that you really try and highlight that and be like, hey guys, King of the Hill today, let's see who's going to get the job done, and to kind of drive that a little bit further?
yeah, that's our Saturdays. And so with the team of 35, I think I've advanced a little bit in bringing younger guys up, sophomores usually that aren't going to play much. I sit them down and I actually ask them, hey, this is the opportunity for you. You can be a sophomore on varsity, maybe hardly ever play. You might pinch run every game, or go down on JVs and be a star. And to credit the kids, most of them say, we'll be on varsity and not play. And so what we do is on Saturdays, usually I have 14 to 17 pitchers on my team. And with 2 games a week, you're not using, 2/3 of those guys. So we play against each other every Saturday. And the kids really like that. I mean, they want to pitch against certain kids want to hit against certain pitchers, and they talk about it in the classroom, and they can't wait for a Saturday. That sophomore who doesn't play much in a game gets to face a Kyle Harrison or a Justin Hooper, or somebody that they kind of looked up to, and they build their confidence from that. So that's the I don't do a lot of fancy stuff in practice. I think it's all about competing. And so those Saturday, we play every Saturday during the season.
Oh, that's really good. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about just obviously some different aspects of your program, but I want to get into game planning if we could, because a good friend of mine the other day, we were talking about just different game planning, just different things that we were doing from just a getting ready to face X pitcher, so. And he's a high school coach, and he was like, how can we use this as high school coaches to be able to do that? And here in Oklahoma, they play 5 days a week. When I coached in Texas, it was a little bit easier because you played 2 or 3 times a week, so you had a little bit of time in between. Tell us how many days of the week you guys play, and then tell us about, let's say that tomorrow, or let's see, today is Tuesday. So let's say that on Friday we're facing the guy that you saw on your last game, who's 90-92 with a slider, who's pitching you backwards. How are you getting ready to face that guy? And then kind of take us through what a game planning meeting would look like for you.
Well, we only play usually like 2 games a week. Sometimes there's 3. So I create a scout schedule in the beginning of the year, and I personally will go and watch teams and evaluate, their strengths and weaknesses. I have an engineering notebook that I do all my scouting on. And so that came from the football side, because I would actually scout for Bob Ladouceur. I would go and film games for him when I was the freshman coach. So I think having information is huge. I think you can I try to skew the percentages in baseball. So if I have a 57% chance of winning this next game, my preparation and the kids' preparation and the advanced scouting, if I can skew that 10% to 67%, that helps us. And it might be that we only have a 20% chance of winning, but I can get it to 30 by preparing. And so our advanced knowledge on our opponents is a lot. We get tendencies, we get, when they like to hit and run, when they do this, when they do that, what to look for. And then we'll incorporate that into our game plan, into our practice plans to do that. Last year, just as an example of how it can cost you, we had to face a tough lefty from another private school, and he was a major slider guy. He's 88 with the slider, but his out pitch was slider. So we put slider machine on the field, and we hit. And we ended up beating them, and we were able to hit sliders, and our lefties were able to hit lefty sliders, which is tough. But then we faced the guy 2 days later or a day later, that's 91 with the slider from the right side. And we could only take away one of his tools. And so we put the machine on 95 and we get it up there, and, the kids struggle with it for a little bit, but your body's adaptable. And so I said, look, we're going to take away his number one tool. We're going to take away his fastball. And then they were smart enough to go backwards on us. And we didn't have enough time to put right-handed slider machine up. So that's a big part of our program, is knowledge of our opponents, who we play, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and how we attack that. And we teach the kids that. We want the kids to be forward thinkers. And so we want them to be able to take a look at their opponents and kind of adapt to that. And hopefully by the time they've graduated, they can think on their own. And when they move off to pro ball or college, they know what they need to get done or what information they need.
Oh, that's really neat. And so you go over these different game plans with the players, and ideally I'm envisioning in my mind that once you give it to them, then the players can start to own that and adapt on the fly in the game. Like you just mentioned, you want them to be forward thinkers and be adaptable, and you're setting the tone by scouting and giving them different information. Have you seen that they've been able to heighten their awareness in game situations because of the work that you guys are putting in? And if so, how can our guests steal a little bit of something from you in regards to that?
Well, I try to keep it simple. I'll see a number of things, but I'm a simple kind of teacher. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. So I try not to throw everything at our players. I try to take away the big thing that our opponents have, and then get them to be comfortable on the field when they see it. They're like, okay, no problem. I've seen this before. And so normally in baseball, the adaptability during a game doesn't happen that often, like in the pros. We talk about, adapting pitch to pitch or inning to inning. And so for us, usually a kid is who he is. And last year they got us because the pitching coach and the pitcher did a great job calling the game against us. We were on time for his fastball, and they flipped on us. And, it's a 7-inning game. Our kids weren't able to adjust that quickly. So it's a good cat and mouse game, and it's fun for the kids. But my suggestion for your listeners is, take away what the other team does best. Make them do something different. And we practice the heck out of that. And from there, then our kids are comfortable when they get on the field and they're confident. That's a big thing for me. I learned that from Bob Ralston. Do the little things over and over again so you're super confident. We want super confident baseball players on the field.
Oh, definitely. And I know that our listeners have heard the term be their own best coach a million times. And I think that you're really helping them to do that in game. And so another thing that I think that is really interesting about high school baseball is that you've got a small group of coaches in a very limited time, and you've got to, and you mentioned this earlier about developing their tools and developing their skills. How have you been able to help them with that aspect? Because I think it's a really tough balance. It's, when you get to the spring, then this is just my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. You start to put that a little bit on the back burner, and you still want to develop that, but you're trying to win games and you're trying to develop them while winning games. And then maybe in the fall, it's a little bit flipped because you're so far away from competition. You want to help them develop, in the weight room, like you mentioned. But how have you been able to help them to develop as an individual baseball player within the setting of the team while still trying to win and compete at a high level?
Well, the winning is just the outcome. So we never really just say, okay, we're going to try to win this game. So it might be that we're developing skill sets that give us a better chance at that. But I think it's summer stuff. It's fall stuff. I want my kids around me all the time. For as much as the COVID thing happened, we were able to get on the baseball field some this summer, and we develop. You really can allow kids to develop that winning mentality, and that goes back to skill sets. Hey, you didn't move up ball in dirt. You didn't dive on that play. You didn't wear that pitch. And so that's the repetition of it. If we waited until spring of their senior year or junior year to do that, we wouldn't be any good. So we have to do that from day one when they're freshmen. So we list out all of our skill sets that we want. For base running, I have 72 things that kids need to know on the bases, and I give them a list of them. And obviously, as a freshman, you're not going to know how to run a double squeeze from second base. But if we do it over and over again and we find opportunities for that, especially in game situations during the summer or during the fall, it becomes second nature, and the kids walk around with confidence because, I'll give that list to my senior shortstop and I go, do you know how to do every one of these? And they're like, oh yeah, coach, no problem. But if I did that with a stud shortstop that's a sophomore, he'd probably look at me cross-eyed and go, yeah, I don't know half those things. So it's just a continuous 4-year journey. I think that's the biggest thing for us is we've turned this program into a 4-year developmental program. And so that's including weight room, classroom, summer games. We'll play anybody, anywhere. We have good relationships with Southern California, with Reno. Pete Savage up at Reno High School does an amazing job. The Las Vegas guys. So we'll play all the time just to create those experiences because there's nothing you can't develop, winning NCS championship, state championship, unless you play games and try to win those games. So
no, I really like that a lot.
Try to win games in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I love that the different points that you highlighted there. So I've got a couple of different questions for you before we head out and let you go. But I know that we're almost an hour in, and this is just you've done an absolutely fantastic job, and I've loved every single minute
I appreciate it.
Getting to hear. Yeah, of course, just about the different things that you do different in your program, because again, it's none of the things that you're saying are cliches. They're what you're actually doing. They're well thought out, and you're helping the players become better men and better baseball players simultaneously, which I think can absolutely happen, which is really cool. But for you and coaching development, I've got a couple of lightning style questions, which are more, and you don't have to do them quickly, but it's more of like, hey, I'm going to ask you and get out of the way. So what was the biggest lesson that you learned as a young coach? And then how did you learn from it and get better for it?
From a baseball skill points standpoint, that was Bob Ladouceur in doing things over and over again, taking a lot of ground balls, doing your feet work, things like that. I think from a development standpoint, I think it is Bob Ladouceur in the football program and in the development side. So as a younger coach, learning that stuff as I got older and older and putting it all together has kind of gotten us to where we are now.
Oh, really cool. So you're able to pull from several different people there, which is neat. What's a drill that your players love that we can steal from you and implement later this week if we wanted to?
I saw that and I asked some of my older players, what it is.
Uh-huh.
And we don't have a fun drill. I mean, everything is hard and difficult. And the best one that they said was just our mass fungos. And we did it yesterday, and it's hard. The kids, get tired. They're diving every play. They're throwing the bases on every play. We got 4 hitters going at once. But those mass fungos are where my sophomore builds a relationship with the starting third baseman, and they help each other, and they create a bond that they refer back to. I talked to one player, and he names the guy that he took ground balls for, and that guy's the starting second baseman at Cal Poly. But he remembers when he was younger taking ground balls with that guy and them sweating together. So it creates a culture of passing things down and just the appreciation of hard work and sweating and being dead tired. So I know that's not a fun one, but we get the most out of that one. I think the players love that when they look back on it.
Oh, really good. Great answer. And then one thing that I think all of our listeners are learners and they're trying to, get better. And so almost every podcast, I think, asks the question of, one book or resources that have helped shape your coaching career. And what are you mentioned a couple of different people, but are there any, books or courses or conventions that have really helped you to become a better coach?
Yeah, I mean, one is just the relationships with other coaches. Coach Carlson up at Oak Grove, like you talked about, Coach Savage up at Reno. I've had my guys listen to Coach Ladouceur's speech on team building. So he's a huge resource. He was a baseball guy too in high school, so he follows us. But I've had him speak to our baseball team on team building. He talks to like companies around the country about that. He has a talk on that, which is awesome. There's also there's an author whose sons actually go here, and he has some national bestsellers, Patrick Lincini, and we're doing the ideal team player right now with our group, which is hard to do because you have to kind of question yourself as a person. He talks about the 3 main things for an ideal team player is humbleness, hungriness, and being smart, and the intermixture of the 3. If you can have all 3 of those things, you get the ideal team player. And then we ask our kids, what do you think you are? Do you fit this bill or do you not? And then we have their teammates say what they see. So a lot of times it's different, and that's a hard thing to do. So we use some of his books. We're like we said, we're lucky enough that his sons play lacrosse here at this school.
So the ideal team player, that is a really interesting one. I'm going to have to look that one up. But David, again, I can't tell you enough of how thankful that I am to be able to interview you today, to be able to conversate with you, and to start to develop a relationship, with you as a fellow coach, and so hopefully somebody that I can keep in contact with. But for our listeners, I'm just going to open up the mic for you. And is there anything else that you'd like to tell them before you go?
No, I really appreciate you having me on. I think high school sports are one of the greatest avenues to affect kids' lives. And we have to remember that, we have that ability to do that as coaches. A kid can go one direction or another. And if he plays a sport, whatever it is, and he's part of a team, it helps him to go in a certain positive direction. And so just for all of us, just being thankful for and understanding the importance of that job. is huge. I'm thankful that I built some humility from the guys around here. I've watched them win championship after championship and win 151 games in a row, and they're out blocking and tackling the next day. And so just the humbleness that Leoncini talks about, and, just the appreciation of what we do as high school teachers and coaches. I think the importance of that to make this place a better place, better world. We got a lot of stuff going on right now. And more than ever, we need good role models on how to build kids with character and are ready to do positive things in this world.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.